Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Education in Focus, powered by Chalkboard News. I'm Dan McCaleb, Vice President of News and Content at the Franklin News Foundation, publisher of chalkboardnews.com. Chalkboard is a news website dedicated to issues related to K-12 education. Joining me again today is Chalkboard's K-12 editor, Brendan Clary. How are you, Brendan?
I'm doing well, Dan. How about yourself?
Doing well, thank you. We are recording this on Monday, October 16th. Brendan, quoting directly from your reporting from late last week, the latest standardized test scores results show academic achievement declines for now the sixth year in a row, with over 40% of students failing to reach college readiness goals. And scores fell again in all testing subjects in the 2022-2023 school year. What's going on here, Brendan?
Yeah, Dan, I think, what I've reported before about some of these standardized testing is basically it's still all bad news, right, from the school closures that we saw in COVID-19. And as you said, this is going sort of beyond that. Like, this has shown a decline that has persisted since then. But I think that this sort of reiterates, the academic achievement losses that students have demonstrated on these standardized test scores. And I think you can argue, back and forth about, are these the best metric to determine student success? But this is the one that we have, right, of these sort of standardized SAT, ACT. There's some other ones, some private assessments called the NWEA. And, statewide assessments, that sort of thing. But, there are these assessments used to try to determine how much do students know? Are they ready for college? And that's what the ACT tries to do, is they try to have benchmarks that sort of indicate whether a student is going to be ready for college.
And colleges and universities across the country use the ACT and or separately the SAT for admission guidelines.
Right, to see, are students going to be successful here, and if they have to say to some students, you're not going to be able to come here, then that can become a factor, right, of what was their ACT score. And just personally, ACT is what my high school made everybody take. And so that is, it's usually the ACT or the SAT, and sometimes, both. But that was the one that I had to take, and that kind of determined here's what colleges are looking for, and this is sort of the average. So that it's sort of a big metric. But as I was saying, you have these college readiness benchmarks, right? That sort of indicate how successful will students likely be, and can't determine everything, but how successful will they be on math class in freshman year of college, and it's low. Like that's what we found from the testing last year, is that only 21% of students nationally met the readiness benchmarks, according to the ACT's report. So the ACT is both the test and also the nonprofit there. It also found that 57% of students who took the test nationwide were below proficiency in understanding what it calls complex texts, which is, the written material, that you find either in college or maybe in the workplace. So like manual or like college level reading. And so that tracks with some of the other assessment data that I've seen come in with the Nation's report card. They had like a long-term trend assessment. I believe that's what it was called, that I covered, that basically found that there had not been any post-pandemic academic recovery, and that the news was basically all bad. And again, the Northwest Evaluation Association reported this summer that some students would need an entire school year, to achieve the academic performance that they had similar to the pandemic. And so for them, that was just like a way that they could highlight the gap that how far students are behind now compared to where they were before school closures related to the COVID-19 pandemic.
So you simultaneously reported that the graduation rates in many districts are soaring. And you talked to someone for this story that said that maybe schools have lowered their standards or their benchmarks.
Yeah, so that was reporting that I did previously, where I talked to, I believe his name is Douglas Harris at Tulane University, and he that's his whole focus, right? His research focus is to try to figure out, what students are learning and what the graduation criteria are, and, what do students know and how do we figure that out? And essentially he said that the graduation rates during COVID were unchanged. And, you see all the this academic achievement loss in these different assessments, but what you don't see is a lower graduation rate on the whole, right? So he said basically something had to give, and these school districts were really uncomfortable saying we're going to punish students for a global pandemic, so we're going to let them graduate. And he recommended using the term COVID credentials to try to describe diplomas essentially handed out to high school students who don't know the same amount as students before the pandemic. So he basically said we have to call that a different sort of thing. And I saw the same sort of thing here with the ACT report. They call it a COVID cohort. And so that's like another way to kind of describe these students who graduated after learning during the pandemic and whose experience in high school was, marked by school closures related to COVID-19. When, a lot of officials said students have to work from home and we're going to, kind of shut everything down. So that's what we've seen in districts like Chicago and Detroit, where they actually said, hey, our graduation rate has increased. But what you don't see is, students meeting those college readiness benchmarks in SAT scores, which is, another standardized test. And so that's something that I looked at last time when I wrote about this is, are students really ready for college or are they graduating? And what I heard from the professor, the researcher, that the criteria to graduate are very fungible. Like you can move that around, and it's sort of a local angle. And there was some statewide, sometimes state or local leniency on let's help these students graduate.
Certainly concerning information there, Brendan, and thank you for your insight. But we are out of time. Listeners can keep up with this story and all stories related to K-12 education at chalkboardnews.com. For Brendan Clary, I'm Dan McCaleb. Please subscribe. Thank you for listening.